Welcome back to Sacred Synergy. I am very excited to share this conversation that I had with Ernie Tamminga with you because I believe that it will resonate with most, if not every listener, because Ernie speaks to this experience of a shared consciousness that I hope everyone will have had, at least on some level in their lives, where there's been a resonance that you felt, a vibration perhaps, a field visually you've entered into. We'll get into parsing apart these little details further into our conversation, but just to kind of bait the hook a little bit in terms of what we have to offer in this conversation and who it might apply to. Ernie is a consummate professional when it comes to his academic and spiritual backgrounds, but this conversation really aims to hit at the heart. So I am very grateful to be offering this and sharing it with all of you. Ernie will take the time to introduce himself and tell you a little bit about more who he is and what he does in the world. But just a quick mention here of the ATA retreat that is coming up at the end of May in 2026. And you can find out more about that by going to teilhard.org. And you can also find out more about Dalesford Abbey, where you can make a private retreat, where you could schedule a group retreat, and you can go to dalesford.org for more information there. And finally, just another brief mention of my forthcoming book, Sacred Synergy, Spiritual and Psychological Growth in an Evolving World, which is slated for release with Paulus Press this coming May 2026. So we'll include information about all those good things in the show notes below with links. And I hope that you enjoy this conversation at the heart of evolution. Ernie, thank you so much for being with us on Sacred Synergy.
Pleasure already.
Some of you may know Ernie from before in the previous iteration of this podcast, the American Teilhard Association podcast, where Ernie and I linked up for a great conversation. And here we are for part two. So, Ernie, for those new to the show, can you please share a little bit about who you are and what you do with most of your time in the world?
Yes. Um, One of the things about what I do with most of my time is the paradox that although I claim to be a planet empath and really treasure the Earth, I spend most of my time inside. In fact, where I am right now on my computer. So I haven't decided yet if that's a paradox or if I need to do anything about it, but I've noticed it increasingly. Um, I've never been able to do just one thing at a time. When I was a kid, my mom said, if you could just concentrate on one thing, you could go really far, but I never could. Um, and so I haven't gone really far in any one area, but I've gone reasonably far in a handful. um, I first became aware of Teilhard de Chardin when my friend since fourth grade is still a friend of mine, Ben Lazardi, introduced me to a group called the Phenomenon of Man Project back in the 1960s. Um, that was back when the book was still mistitled that way, The Phenomenon of Man. Now,
Mm.
phenomenon. So I've been involved with the vision of Teilhard de Chardin for over 50 years and did my dissertation on him at UC Santa Barbara Religious Studies Department. The other main influence in my life from that same time was the 5 years I was with in the seminar of Raimon Panikkar, which he called cross-cultural religious anthropology. Um, my current holy trinity is Teilhard de Chardin, Raimon Panikkar, and Whitehead, broadly speaking, at least the processed community. My three main influences, and they still are forming each other. I had a career for 10, 20 years in computers. Even at that time, I couldn't do one thing at a time. So I was going to religious studies at Cal State Northridge at night while working as a computer programmer during the day. And I'm happily married and looking forward to coming to the Teilhard, I guess we're calling it a conference in May.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. It'll
I
be
hope,
great to be
yep,
together in person again.
yeah. I think that's my basic thumbnail sketch of myself. could go on for a long time, obviously. So I won't.
Sure, sure. I really appreciate you putting in your own words who you are and what you're doing in this world. Um, Grateful that we can connect again for a second conversation here. Like I've mentioned, our first conversation, I think, really touched on some of Teilhard's core ideas, yet we were able to expand on that a little bit. And that's where we're hoping to pick up with today in terms of looking at this concept of the noosphere and how the internet is not the noosphere and what it really means to be self-aware, getting into some of these personal experiences we've had of this shared awareness. So I'm really looking forward to what we might uncover today. So, like I was saying, we talked earlier in our first conversation about this concept of the noosphere. Revisiting that, what do you understand that to mean for the noosphere to become self-aware beyond just global connectivity and the sharing of information?
I think that's the core part of it right there, beyond the sharing of information. Um, I'm still very much emotionally wedded to the possibility of the noosphere awakening. Um, Teilhard emphasizes in his own work, especially the human phenomenon, he's anticipating an omega point.
Mm,
He envisions the noosphere becoming conscious of itself. He emphasizes in a few places that this could be a really long process given the way that evolution really works. But he's still looking forward to such a point is probably not a really good word for it, but such a transformation.
mhm,
And I am too. I like this. One of my mottos is that this is still the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
mhm,
And our mistake back in the 60s and 70s when we sang that song so much was to think that a change of age happens fast, and it doesn't. So we're still very much in the dawning of the age of Aquarius. I take that phrase to mean the awakening of the planet. Um, Teilhard, in the very last part of the Human Phenomenon book, envisions several possibilities for the future. And he acknowledges that one possibility, which he does not endorse, obviously, is a final bifurcation of good and evil, both of which might become conscious of themselves. And his preferred outcome is a harmonious awakening of the planet to itself. I mean, that's what I'm counting on as well. Um,
Me too.
my main teacher, Raimon Panikkar, used to say when asked about the human future, he would say, "I'm holding out for a mutation."
Mm, I like that. And what's interesting is I just, not to interrupt you, but just to comment quickly, I just got done an interview with Ilia Delio, and that
Ah,
interview is available now. And her upcoming book is called The Christian Mutation.
ah, yeah.
And so I just find that ironic there. Yeah. We're holding out for a mutation.
I haven't watched that interview with Ilya yet. I'm looking forward to it. And sometimes, frankly, I guess it's okay to say this while we're recording. Sometimes she has struck me as too technophilic for
Hmm.
my own taste, except not so much recently. So I'm looking forward to hearing that most recent conversation that you had with her.
Yeah, it was a great discussion. We definitely cover a lot of that ground for sure. So, yeah.
Have you seen the series Pluribus on?
No, I have not. But you are not the first person to mention it to me, especially knowing my interest in Teilhard de Chardin. So, what are your thoughts regarding the show? Maybe just in a nutshell, if you could tell us what it's about.
The main character is a romance novel writer, but in the first episode, she's selling or signing her books in a bookstore. Um, and then it's in that same first episode, something happens. A signal is coming from space, and they don't explain how it worked, but suddenly almost everybody on Earth is subject to whatever it is that's happening. They
Hmm.
they tremble and they become it, what happens in a nutshell is they become one consciousness, um,
Mm,
except for 11 people on the planet who are not subject to that.
okay.
So the main character is one of those people who is not subject to it. So the whole series deals in a really inventive way with how she's coming to terms with being not one of them and what her opinion is about all of them and the relationship. It really gets into the relationship between individuality and shared consciousness.
Mm,
So it's very Teilhardian, um, only in the sense of the possibility of a widely shared consciousness. Um, the way that the shared consciousness happens in the series is not the way that I hope it would.
hmm
It's really
hmm
fascinating the way they've developed it. It's a science fiction theme that's been done before with, but usually in the science fiction films that have dealt with a shared consciousness, usually it's presented in a very sinister way. Dangerous people all joined as one sinister force. In this one, it's almost the opposite.
mm.
Everybody is supremely happy, always smiling, and they're all experiencing the same thing at the same time. But the series focuses on the relationship between Carol, the main character, who's not changed, and one of the women who is part of the collectivity. They
Mm.
have some interesting conversations even about the use of the personal pronoun. Her friend actually becomes her friend, always refers to we because she's part of Everett, everybody. And they have a conversation about that pronoun in one of the episodes.
Mm.
So a lot of these angles are really interestingly thought out. I won't say any more than that because I'd get into spoilers and it's
Okay, yeah, you leave us hanging and entice us to watch. Well, yeah, it's certainly something that I think even to the the lay person who's never given any thought maybe to consciousness and these larger concepts, we see how there is a natural, what's the word I'm looking for? There's just a natural unfolding whereby I'm thinking of social media in particular, people start to fall into like their little hole of information and their algorithm generates things that reflect what they like and whatnot. And there's started to become like a hive mind almost in that based on your political views or whatever the data set is that the algorithm's reading, right? And it just feeds you
right,
content that supports that and encourages you to follow people that share similar views, right? And then you go into the world and you might think, well, everyone thinks like I do because everyone's seeing the same information on the screen that I'm seeing. And really, that's not the reality that we're quickly finding out. And it's much more abrasive than that, unfortunately.
right. And it's certainly not the case that the internet, even with AI, has become a common consciousness. There's individual interactions with the technology that's very much not the same as a group consciousness. I hesitate to use that phrase because it's got sinister meanings as well, which I don't intend. Um, but it occurred to me very recently that the AI as a interactive chat bot is very much one to one or one to none. I would say one to, I don't believe there's any centered consciousness in AI, at least not yet, maybe never. Um, and then I envision human groups where, say, there's a dozen people together interacting, talking, enjoying each other. And the AI experience is not that. It's one on one with the
Yeah.
computer. So that's one big gap, I'd say. Um,
Yeah, I recently talked with Brian McLaren, and
I watched it.
he made a comment about how AI only says what has already been said,
Yeah,
as opposed to the contemplative mind, which goes to a place to find something that has never been said before.
yeah.
Yeah.
AI can be, it can simulate creativity even, and in that sense, saying things that have not been said, but there's something not there.
Mm.
I know you're familiar with the phrase the uncanny valley.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did some research on that and found out that it was originated by a Japanese fellow named, I've got it here, Masahiro Mori, M-O-R-I, who died last year. And and the reason he called it the uncanny valley is he talks about how when we encounter something that reminds us of human or appears to be somewhat similar to human, um, anywhere from little furry animals with two eyes and
Mm.
oh, how cute, and we feel an empathy toward them. And he says Mori hypothesized that the more this other entity becomes similar to human, the more our empathy is aroused until he says it reaches a certain point of becoming close to human where our empathy suddenly turns to revulsion. And so
Mm.
if we were plotting that, that's where the valley comes from because there's a big
Okay.
dip there. Um, and that's being studied by a number of people from different angles. He did not present it as a scientific provable theory. He was observing
Yeah.
experience, I think. I have a quote here from him that I like, noting that people are approaching it from the standpoint of what's going on in the brain when we're experiencing that. They've done some brainwave tests. Maury says, I do appreciate the fact that research is being conducted in this area, but from my point of view, I think that the brain waves act that way because we feel eerie. It does not explain why we feel eerie to begin with.
Mm.
So he's addressing the reductionist approach taken so often, even toward consciousness, trying to explain it totally in terms of physical, electrophysical things going on within our brains.
Mhm.
And he obviously thinks, and I do too, that we are obviously affected by things happening in our brains. But I think it's a two-way, at least a two-way street, that our feelings, even our thinking, does affect what's going on in our brain as well as vice versa. And that's the part that's usually left out by what I call the materialist superstition,
Mm.
that everything is reducible to physical interactions.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I'm thinking of how in people that have suffered some form of trauma, for example, the trauma is often held in the body, within the
Right.
tissues, in the cells, within certain movements or postures, maybe, and how there have been a revolutionary number of therapies developed to help people work with that and make that conscious connection that much more real so as to be able to differentiate from the trauma and then from their lived reality now, which hopefully is healing in some way or at least along that process. Um, yeah, it seems like we're at a great point of hyperconnect hyperconnection through technology that is mirrored or is so let me back that up. We are at a point now where the hyperconnectivity that we are experiencing through technology is, I think, just it's like a dim mirror, an unclear mirror of the hyperconnection that's already present within the natural world.
Yeah,
And then here we are as a bridge between those, and we seem to be leaning more towards the technology piece than establishing or reestablishing some state of balance with the natural world. And in my mind, at least, that's where a lot of this tension and anxiety and fear of this next great transition through technology, or with not through, but with technology, that we are approaching.
I agree. Teilhard emphasizes that what he's trying to envision is a matter of connectivity, not only mind to mind, but heart to heart.
Yeah.
And AI does not carry that. That's why we call it artificial intelligence, not artificial feeling or emotion.
Right. Right. That's true. That's a good point. That's a good point. So we go back to this idea of awakening, and I like how you started with explaining how, Teilhard understood awakening as a process. That's how you approach it, as painstaking as that is sometimes. We naturally, without delay, in Teilhard's own words, want to see the end accomplished, right? We want to see the final product. But for for a large part of our life, right, you're a father, a grandfather, um, that's something you may never see, right? And that's something I've come to realize having children of my own now. And it's this value in sowing seeds and doing what we can now in the present moment, no matter how small that may seem, right? Um, yeah. So, what inspires you to continue to have hope for this shared awakening, this global awakening, and what allows you to get past all the fragmentation that we're experiencing now in the world?
Um, I don't always get past it. Um,
Thanks for that. Me neither.
but the hope, not in the sense of um, looking toward a guaranteed outcome, but the hope in trying to envision what I'm convinced is possible, but we would have to really have to put our minds to it and our hearts, importantly. Um,
Yeah.
we can put our minds to controlling each other, and there's a lot of that going on. Um, my hope is the sense that, and it's a really deep sense that the planet wants to awaken. And we are, we humans are its best hope, or at least part of its best hope for awakening. Um, I think that I'm of a similar sentiment to yours, that it's not only humans that need to share in this awakening. Other, all life around us um, wants to become aware of itself, not in the sense of thinking like we do, but being self-aware. You can see self-awareness in other beings easily by looking into their eyes or whatever equivalent they have of eyes. Um, pausing there. I remember back in the 70s during my computer programming career, um, I wrote a simple little interactive thing that um, it would ask a question of the person who was using it, and then depending on the answer to the question, it would go on to the next question. But it wasn't anything like AI. I was just predefining possible answers that they might give,
Mm.
and then programming the next response based on that. And so that was like a pretend interaction. But I shared it with a few people who seemed to really enjoy communicating with this little program. Um, I always remind myself of how easy it was to do that. I have no idea how to program computers anymore. It's changed so much since my day. Um, but I don't believe that there is I have not experienced a centered, agential awareness to AI. I interact with AI occasionally, but mainly for my own self. It's for looking up answers to technical questions that I have, and it's really, really good at that.
Mhm.
If I'm using a program and I run into something that I don't know how to do next, I can ask it, and it'll give me step-by-step answers. I'm very, very impressed with that. Personally, I almost never try to engage with it in the chat mode. I don't find that all that interesting at this point.
Yeah, ChatGPT now has a function that allows you to control its tone for its responses too. So it's maybe less, flowery in the language and over affirming and things like that. I don't know if you've ever seen the little meme comic where it's someone who is, I don't want to call someone stupid, but someone who is not exhibiting a reasonable even level of intelligence. And ChatGPT's response back to him was, "Wow, what a fantastic question. I think you are the person that could solve this world problem," or something. It's like,
Yeah.
so yeah, I've seen where you can program the language to just be much more matter of fact, and it takes away that component of conversing with another person. I know some people that are really drawn to it for the conversational aspect,
Yeah.
and it's really it's like it's almost like anthropomorphizing Google in a way, whereby instead of typing your query into the search bar using specific parameters like maybe Boolean searching or things like that. I don't even know if they teach that to kids anymore in school. You can start to hone your search results, but that takes time, right? It takes time to filter through. And then do I want to click this website or that, right? Whereas ChatGPT will just do that like that for you.
That's right.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast just a couple of days ago where they were talking about AI, and the background of the people in the conversation was spiritual. Um, in the corner of the spiritual community that I would call woo woo, they were coming from that. And at one point, the man in the conversation was extolling AI, and he said a big advantage of AI is that it can take emotion out of what you're trying to understand. And that struck me as just exactly wrong. Um, if we're trying to understand what it is to be human, spiritual at all, deliberately taking emotion out of that seems almost exactly the wrong direction. I don't know if all of AI is deliberately doing that, but he was extolling AI for that particular reason. It takes emotion out of it. Although, like I said a moment ago, it can pretend emotion also, like praising you is kind of like an emotional response.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking that if we really want to continue to evolve in the way that Teilhard has explained it to us, whereby we are evolving to our fullest state or form possible, right? Which would be, according to the church fathers, if we want to bring in some theology, our divinized self, our most Christ-like or God-like self in that way. And that would presuppose our whole self.
Yeah,
And it seems like with AI, it's very much like from the neck up. We engage with that and not with our entirety of ourself, right? Or our body at the very least. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So Ernie, I'm curious. It was something we talked about prior to our conversation today offline. You indicated that you have had a couple of very unique experiences whereby you have gotten a taste of a shared awareness. Would you care to elaborate a little bit about those and what they mean to you?
Love to. The first one that I can remember was I was about probably 10 or 11 years old and was sitting on the swing set in the back of my parents' house in Tucson, Arizona. And from my point of view at the swing set, I was at the back in the backyard of the house, so I could see the back of the house. And then over at the side was the an open area that opened to the street. And as I was sitting there, just sitting there, um, a little girl, i.e., my age, that I had never seen before, came around the side of the house and came back to where I was and just stood next to me. And we talked for a little bit. Her name was Tina. She told me that. I had never seen her before. And during the whatever we were talking about, I don't remember the subject, it was like a field arose, either between us or around us. You could say both ways. And I could tell that we both felt it. And it was not something we talked about. So that's why I often distinguish between whatever that is and rational thinking. I distinguish between those. And that only lasted a couple of minutes, maybe. Very, very real though. And then after a few more minutes, she left. I never saw her again.
Mm.
So that was the first time I saw her, last time I saw her, and I'll never forget her because of that moment. And much later in life, when I was in graduate school, um, the other most vivid one, I was sitting with a friend. Her name is Maya. We were sitting in the backyard of a church in Isla Vista here near the university, waiting for Raimon Panikkar, who was saying a mass. We were outside waiting for him to be done with that. And as we were talking, this field arose.
Mm.
Um, this time we did both explicitly address it. We asked each other, "Do you feel that?" And yes, we both did. We did not try to define or describe it, but within the happening of it itself, we both acknowledged that yes, I feel that. Um, and that it gradually faded after several minutes. But again, really, really vivid. So I don't forget it.
Mm.
Um, those two, there have been really short encounters like that, occasionally just briefly um, locking eyes with someone, even
Mm-hmm.
just briefly in passing. Sometimes there's just this little connection
Mm-hmm.
that happens. Um, so all of these, I'm at a point in my life where I'm constructing my life story. Right? So all of these things make a coherent story to me.
Yeah.
And two other experiences that amplify that for me. One was maybe 10 years ago. Was visiting a cousin in Chicago, and during the night I had this hyper realistic dream where I was walking somewhere and I came to a group of people, maybe 15, 20 people, mainly younger than I, and they were all involved with each other doing something. Um, not physically involved, at least not only physically involved. Something was going on. And I could just tell that it was really important. And I didn't understand what it was. And I was neither invited nor rejected. And then eventually I moved on. And fairly quickly after that, woke up. And it felt like it belonged to the same kind of experience that I was describing in waking life.
Mm-hmm.
Really felt like it belonged to that. And in fact, I emailed my friend the one with whom I had had that experience under the tree. I emailed her, um, "It has begun." And I had a second such dream a couple of years later, I guess it was, where I'm standing in a theater at the top of the middle aisle, and the audience is just waiting for something to start. And I hear a group of people over to my right talking about Raimon Panikkar, my main teacher, and they're talking in a negative way. So I'm curious and move in their direction. Then I said, I don't want to stay near them, I decide. So I start moving down the aisle, floating instead of walking. That was cool. Wish I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I come to the stage, there's a group of people again, mainly younger than I, and again involved with each other in some way that I don't understand, but I can tell it's really important. And I just watch for a while and have this sense that whatever's going on here is really important. I'm neither invited nor rejected. Um, so then I start moving back up the opposite aisle. And as I get to about halfway up the aisle, this little girl leaves her seat, takes my hand, and walks with me. And the dream ends there. But again, a sense of hyper realism that said it belonged to this kind of experience is talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Told that story to a friend of mine, and he said, "Oh, that was Tina, that girl." Could
Maybe.
Anyway, those just in themselves um, feed so powerfully into my Teilhardian take on the planet that they almost reaffirm it all by themselves. Those
Yeah.
experiences do.
Well, thank you for sharing those. Those are beautiful experiences that you very kindly shared with us. Um, I don't mean by this question to uh, force you to reduce the experience at all, but I'm just curious, when you entered that place of knowing, was there anything sensually, like a visual field that was indicative? Was it more of, like an intuition? Was it something you felt, maybe like a vibration in your body? Can you describe it, or does that reduce it in some way?
Partially a vibration in my body. And
Hmm.
Teilhardian word that comes to mind was that there was some kind of energetics
Hmm.
going on. It was obvious that there was some kind of energetics,
Yeah,
not that abstract though, but there
yeah,
some kind of energies, shared energies going on among the people that I was watching.
yeah.
And again, I was not rejected from participating in that, but I was not invited either. So I did not participate.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I mean, I'm just speculating and having fun here, but I almost wonder if it's like in the dream realm on the astral level or whatever, you encountered those souls doing that work. And it's like, well, you have your own work to do, Ernie, but it's not exactly in this dimension. It's
Yeah,
within that dimension. And I guess I'm just having some fun with it. But yeah. But we're ultimately all in some way connected interdimensionally.
right.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I'll add about Tina. The one of the most striking things for me about that experience was that's the only time I ever saw her.
yeah.
It was as if she came to share that experience.
Right. Well, I very much appreciate how you're able to put this in your own language that draws from your own background. You have a background in technology, you have an awareness of science, you have a background in spiritual direction. So obviously the interior world is something that is familiar to you. And you're able to put it in your own unique language where it's not just like, oh, well, Tina was an angel and God sent me an angel. That, I mean, maybe she was,
Maybe she was.
but for all you know, she was, maybe a girl that they moved shortly thereafter or something, right? We don't know, but all we know is that she was real, you're real, it happened, and the experience between you was very real in that way, and it taught you so much, and it left such an impact on you.
Yeah,
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 whereby it's also been repeated in some fashion throughout the course of your life.
that's right.
Yeah, yeah. I've noticed that with people who I feel a particularly close connection with, especially I don't want to be like exclusionary by saying this, but if they share anywhere near of even a fraction of the appreciation for Teilhard that someone like I have or you have, it like opens up a channel or a doorway to these
Right.
experiences I've found, And like sometimes my wife and I, who obviously I'm very close with, sometimes we'll just like look at each other when we are getting a sense of this stirring in our life in the world, right?
She share the stirring.
Yeah, it's like a knowing, it's a stirring, maybe it's a gut thing,
Yeah,
but it's just kind of like a mutual acknowledgement of, okay, let's be very present here. Let's pay good attention. Let's be humble. Um, yeah, and it's not, maybe always like, oh, isn't life just sunshine and rainbows? Sometimes it's like, this is a great call to pause and reflect and really think about how we're going to proceed. I mean, especially if it's like something with our children or whatever, right? So yeah, like I said, I don't want to diminish your experience at all by asking you to put it into words because I know having had experiences like that, it starts to lose some of its oomph when you try and, especially in a very analytical way, like a bioassay, try and describe it. I mean, it maybe depends on who you are, but I had someone one time. when I had experienced something very powerful in another country, she looked right away at me and she knew I had experienced something. And she says, "You need to write it down, but write poetry," she said, or
Yeah,
she goes, "Write it in a song, and it'll be that much easier to come back to."
yeah, yeah, yeah. Poetry is more evocative than rational prose that way. Although it's fun to try to capture things in rational prose too.
Especially if you are somewhat science minded and it takes you back to like a seventh grade lab report where it's like, whoa, I experienced this and then I felt that and then I saw it, right? So it's kind of fun that way. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
one of the areas of life that I wish I had a richer experience of mathematics. I envy it when I hear somebody looking at a equation and saying, "That's a beautiful equation."
Hmm.
I don't experience that, and I wish I could. I didn't pay enough attention in math in high school.
Yeah. Once they started adding letters in with the numbers, that kind of threw me for a loop. But yeah. So, what do these experiences teach you, Ernie? What does it teach you about boundaries, about consciousness, about the self?
Hmm. I would agree with Teilhard that love is the most powerful force in the universe. Not powerful in the sense of being able to overwhelm other forces, but powerful in the sense of that's how things really change and grow is because of love. It is love. Um, I love Teilhard's, there's love again. I love Teilhard's quote about love is the free and imaginative outflowing of the spirit over all unexplored paths. I really like that. Um, and I lost track. I lost track of the question. Where are we?
Oh, that's okay. I was just asking you what these experiences have taught you about, call them psychological or spiritual boundaries, permeability of consciousness of the self.
Well, one thing, this not directly to that, but one thing I've noticed a lot recently is I cannot come anywhere near comprehending people who seem to enjoy hurting other people.
Mm,
And there's a lot of that right now. I don't understand it. Um, the only way I can even try to frame it for myself is Teilhard's possibility of a final bifurcation.
mm.
I hope it's not that, but that one really boggles my mind and my heart. How can somebody enjoy hurting somebody else?
Yeah, I agree with you. So yeah, I mean, I think that for a lot of people, we're just seeking a great release from this intense tension that we are feeling as a species, as a planet. I think part of that tension is that we don't see ourselves. Some of us don't see ourselves as a species, a part of this planet. There is an exceptionalism, right, to the human person in that way. But we're not the center of the universe in that way. We're part of something much bigger. Life, in some ways, is the center of the universe. And how do we fall into that rhythm of life? A more, yeah, coherent, a greater equilibrium with that rhythm of life.
Yeah, communion. A really hopefulizing thing going on right now is the reaction to those Buddhists who are walking across the country. I mean,
Yeah.
hundreds or thousands of people turning out to
Yeah.
witness them. I mean, that's very real too. Um, so we're in I'm sure that at almost any point in history, you could say we're at a turning point in history, but but I think we really are um, today. Um, not only a turning point and things, can change, but deliberate forces and energies going in opposite directions, turning point in that way as well. Something I'm really fascinated with, and this plays into thinking about noosphere, is other people's minds
Mm.
other than mine. Um, I've only fairly recently had some interesting responses to questions. Um, well, a friend told me not too long ago that she does not think in pictures. She doesn't get images in her minds. And that fascinated me. So asking a lot more questions about how her mind does work. Um, and then realizing that we all have our own individual way of thinking, being. And it is fascinating to ask somebody how their mind works. So many differences, and they're all really good. Um, I don't share in them. Like I said, I'm not steeped very much in math, and I wish I had more of that for my own mind, but I don't. But I really appreciate it. And I have at least a couple of friends who can look at a pile of junk and see immediately what could be made out of that. Appropriately, they both work in or work sometimes in theater, like building sets. So perfect aptitude for that.
Mhm.
I can't do that. At one time, I was trying to put together an exercise board that I had bought, and it came with illustrated instructions. And I got to the point where I realized if I keep working on this, it's going to break. So I called up one of these friends, and they came, and within about 5 minutes, they had the whole thing put together. Um, so the way that our minds work is so different and so fascinating. And somehow it all wants to fit together, I think.
Yeah, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking of the community here at Dalesford Abbey. There's a community of 16 professed religious, there's 16 priests that live here,
Uh,
and 16 different personalities and 16 different opinions, right? But they share a life in communion, or as they call it, communio, and it means one mind and heart in Christ together.
mm,
So, I mean, that is a specific Christian example of what you're talking about here, but I'm thinking of how it's not perfect, right? Everyone has their flaws and everyone has their gifts that they bring to the table. Everyone has, like I said, a personality, which means that personalities sometimes don't always click. They sometimes are abrasive with one another or cause tension. Carl Jung talked about how the meeting of two personalities is like a chemical reaction, whereby you don't know what the end product is going to be sometimes. Um, but their every day is this devotion to something larger than themselves, to the community, but then something larger than the community, in terms of their religious devotion. That way, there is a rhythm of life that they follow to work toward that and maintain that and keep that practice up. And it's not just like the community was formed one day and then that was it, right? It's an ongoing process. So it's like is Omega just this one point in time singularly, where then by from there on out everything is just peachy, right? Or is it this slow and painful and tedious awakening to this reality that's in the future, but we are embodying and manifesting right now?
It occurs to me too that um, it is fairly uncommon. I don't want to start it that way. Um, when somebody starts becoming aware of the way their own mind works, something triggers that. Um, and as I've found out to my delights, just asking people how their minds work. You can't just ask it that way, but asking specific stuff um, can get somebody thinking about their own mind. And from that point on, it can be fascinating. Um,
Yeah, I've noticed that feedback helps. Like if you can find some personal feedback, well, obviously, external feedback is invaluable, but if you can start to become aware of some personal feedback loops, like, oh, if I don't stretch before I lift this heavy weight, I hurt my back or something like that. And I've found that the older I get, the more of those physical feedback loops I find regarding, physical exertion and projects I may take on and stuff. And it's looking for, I think, more like internalized feedback loops now in terms of like my mental, emotional, spiritual status and stuff like that when I engage. But That's a lesson I realized I am in process of learning is like realizing my limitations with certain physical things.
Another little channel of things that convince me about the reality of the possibility of a planet awakening are little channels like coincidences. Um, I love coincidences. Um, some people say there's no such thing. I think there are. Some things are just coincidences, but sometimes things like to occur to get together. I think Carl Jung said that.
Yeah.
Coincidences are things that like to occur together. Um, I tend to have a lot of those recently. I'll start thinking about reading up on something, and then from a source I wasn't expecting, it'll get introduced to me um, to get into. Um, this is not quite the same thing, but another experience of this kind of thing was my wife's mother, whom I really loved, died several years ago, and shortly after she died, I came out where I am right now and turned on my computer, and her face came up. And I had not yet even touched my mouse. I just turned on the computer and said, "Oh, that's interesting." And that happened twice. Um, and both times, the second time, I saw the cursor moving to where my photographs are stored, but I was not touching my mouse, and it selected her picture and brought it up again. My wife was semi-resentful of that because, well, she didn't come to me.
Oh, well, I'm just thinking of Marshall McLuhan and how I believe he speculated on electricity as the Holy Spirit. Now, of course, that's reductionist of the Holy Spirit. But in believing that God is in all things, right? The Holy Spirit moves through all things. We have that idea of in the East, it's what creator, sustainer, and change, right? So you have Brahma, you have Vishnu, and you have Shiva as change, right? So then we have Father, Son, and Spirit.
Yeah.
You have the creator, you have the sustainer and the Son, and then Spirit is the change. And um, yeah, so I don't know where they connect, but just some loosely associated thoughts there.
The Trinity is one of my favorite love affairs. I love the Trinity.
Yeah. Well, and it calls us to this relational ethos, right? And even in death, there is relationship. Um, yeah, I'm just thinking of how one of the beloved priests here, Father Andrew, died in the past year, and he was a good personal friend as well. And in so many ways, it's like he's even more present in this abbey now,
Mm.
to me and to the others that were particularly close to him than he was when he was here in his room. You know, it's almost kind of like the Obi-Wan Kenobi, where it's like his presence is diffused to an even greater realm. Yeah. And that relationship, to my point, almost feels strengthened.
Yeah.
Like there are times when I might feel an absence of his presence, but then I kind of move out of the smallness of my ego and come into a greater awareness of grace in that way. And
Mm.
what that presence is transformed by grace in that way. I don't want to get too theological, but it's just the language that comes to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Theological language of perichoresis, um, the the mutually constitutive relationships in the Trinity. Um, my teacher Raimon Panikkar maintained that the Trinitarian insight, as he called it, is a human invariant. I mean,
Mm.
it's cited an Indian take on a take on the Trinity. Um, so the mutually constituting, that not only relating to each other, but mutually constituting each other, that's the Trinitarian insight.
Mm.
And Panikkar, a teacher, often found himself coining words, trying to describe things that he couldn't find any word for. Um, One phrase of his was the cosmotheandric insight,
Yeah.
um, which in the seminar we insisted it should be theanthropocosmic, because andros means specifically male.
Sure. So
And
what was the suggestion that it should be?
theanthropocosmic,
The
that for
anthropo.
anthropos is, human, not specifically male nor female, which andros is specifically male.
I guess it doesn't roll off the tongue as easily as cosmotheandric.
That's what I was going to say. It's a more unwieldy word.
Sure, sure, sure.
But
Well,
yes,
Ernie, I'm very grateful for a lot of these personal experiences that you've shared today as we've talked. I think this conversation, for me, has opened up a lot of different ways of thinking of things, mirrored in your own experience, as I've maybe experienced things similar. It expands my own sense of experience in that way. So I'm just very grateful for the candidness with which you've shared today.
appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So as we begin to work toward the close of our time together here, is there anything I know we talked off camera, like I said, but is there anything else we wanted to talk about today we haven't gotten to yet, particular?
Looking at my notes, I think we've covered what I had hoped we would.
Yeah, yeah. I know there's been a lot of food for thought you've given me. Like I said, just in sharing your own perspective, which really was my hope to a large degree with this podcast project, was to give people like yourself an opportunity to share your own experience, your perspective, and the work that you're doing, rather than just hyper focusing on Teilhard. He's very important, but I think he would agree that it's even more important now what we are doing with all of this.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it certainly has been ongoing change in the world since 1955 when he passed. Um, Teilhard himself is, to my taste, a bit too technophilic as well.
Mm.
Um, the his little essay about the hydrogen bomb kind of appalls me that when the hydrogen bomb went off on Bikini Atoll, all of humanity took a step forward.
Mm.
No, no, he didn't. Um, and I think that had to have come out strictly from his technophilia, I would say, because not in any demonstrable way that enhances consciousness could that explosion have been an evolutionarily good thing.
Yeah, I mean, could it have been even prior to that, speaking to math, of the mathematicians who wrote the formula for the chemical reaction or something like that, right? Yeah, is it one of those things that is to acknowledge sin and evil in the world as an incompleteness?
Yeah.
And yeah, how is that seen as a step forward? That is challenging.
I remember writing a note in the book, I think first time I read that particular essay.
Mhm.
Um, what about all those people who had to leave their homes because of that atomic test?
Yeah.
It was not all of humanity that took a step forward by any means.
You know, there was a conference given, I want to say 2019 or 2018, by Center for Christogenesis, and Cynthia Bourgeot was the featured speaker. And she made this point about Teilhard being more concerned with life than individual lives.
Yeah,
And I don't know if that's taken directly from his own writing or if that's something she came to an understanding of, but it's just something that's kind of sat with me and has arisen from time to time since I heard her say that.
yeah. I would tend to agree with the way I understand that, what you just said, anyway. Um, Visually, it has occurred to me that Teilhard, uh, some of the slides that we developed in the Phenomenon of Man project way back then, over, I was not one of the artists, but the artist created over 600 color slides to illustrate the human phenomenon. And most of them are quite linear, a Teilhardian arrow going up,
Yeah.
even though there's this before the dawn of reflection, there's the illustration of evolution trying everything, so branching out. And then with the dawn of reflection, the way that Teilhard puts it is evolution changes both hemisphere and pole. So then it's converging after we appear. And yet it's spherical references notwithstanding, Teilhard is quite linear. It's there's a lot. The arrow of progress uses that terminology as well, and that's one of the reasons that the trinity that I invoked for myself, Teilhard, Raimon Panikkar, and Whitehead. Teilhard I take to be like this, an ever ascending line, the way he even puts it. Both Panikkar and Whitehead are, on the other hand, very tuned to the atomistic dynamics. Goes on. The element that you said, Cynthia Bourgeon said that Teilhard was not strong at was the individual. Paradoxically, he seemed to be really good at individual relationships. I mean, people who knew him loved him, but he does not focus his rational attention on the interplay between persons. And Panikkar is that's everything to Panikkar is relationality, as it is with the process theology or process philosophy group. Relationality comes before substances, actually, more fundamental than substances. So to me, the three that make up my trinity really constitute each other. They're a trinity. They need each other. We need Teilhard's sense of direction, because that's kind of where hope comes from. We're moving, as he said. We're going somewhere. But we need to understand how we're getting there together as well.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your being able to pull those three together and the way you're able to articulate their relationship and how it gives us a fuller perspective on the big picture.
Right.
Yeah. So Ernie, like I said, we've been very grateful for the time and all the insight and wisdom you've shared with us today. I'm curious, how do you find synergy with the sacred in your life currently?
I tend to be most comfortable, most spiritually hopeful on kind of the level of the infinite. Love the universe. Ground level is much harder for me. I find spiritual connection in other people and other living beings, but life on this planet in our time is very, very, very challenging. So my own spirituality has to have the sense of that there's a much wider possibility that is not only possible for us, but wants to be discovered.
Yeah. I like that. It wants to be discovered. Yeah. It's like that which you desire is desiring you.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And Ernie, how can people find out more about you and your work? And do you have any projects going on, any studies you're currently leading or are going to be leading in the future?
I have 2 online seminars currently, one through the American Teilhard Association. We've been working for over a year on reading The Human Phenomenon, and we're almost done. We're in the Christian epilogue. It's coming up soon through the American Teilhard Association. We're shifting focus to my teacher, Raimon Panikkar. We're going to read a book called Christophany. Kathy Duffy said, "Okay, you can do that, but make some kind of bridge between the two. So I'll work on that.
I'm sure you won't have a problem with that. It'll be seamless. Yeah.
Right. And I keep saying I'm planning to put together the equivalent of a Substack. I'm doing it through a platform called Ghost instead. My working title is Omega, What's the Point?
Cool.
That doesn't exist yet. If somebody wants to contact me directly, the best way right now is an email address, Ernie, is my first name, at pointomega.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing that information. You've had some opportunities there to plug in with Ernie with his book study going forward. And we're just very grateful for, like I said, all that he has poured forth here today. You've given us a lot of things to think about in terms of your shared experience, in terms of your speculative view, but I think more than anything, the emphatic hope that you have despite the challenges of the present for the future. Yeah.
Hope to do this again and look forward to seeing you in Pennsylvania in May.
Yeah, it'll be great to see you in person, and it's always great to connect with you, Ernie.
Bye for now.